All right, hey everybody, welcome to another podcast with some of the fellows here at the Light Church, and today we are continuing our podcast in our Freedom series. This week we are doing Freedom from the Noise, and Pastor Justin preached this last Sunday, and it was an awesome service. I actually watched it on the live stream because I was in the children's room, and I actually lost Pastor Justin's kid in the middle of the service, so there was a lot of noise that was going through my head in the middle of that, but it was a really good message. So if you haven't watched it, make sure to go back on Facebook or YouTube and catch that sermon. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit a few notes from that. Today I have with me Pastor Toby with the Light Church. Toby, thanks for joining us, even though I gave you no choice but to be a part of it.
You're welcome.
And we got Rowdy Vanderkay here with Vanderkay Solutions, and Rowdy's joining us as well. I didn't give him much of a choice either, but thank you for doing that. And then behind the screen, behind the cameras, we actually do have Pastor Justin here with us today, but he's in his army clothes and making things happen and
being shy
and stuff like that. So I just want to talk, kind of the whole purpose behind this podcast is it's for anybody, but specifically for the Light Church. You know, it's the word that we have for this year is freedom. And so these podcasts are specifically for the purpose of helping the Light Church and anybody else, but specifically the Light Church, walk through finding freedom from different things. And so freedom this week was freedom from the noise, and we'll get into mine later. But man, noise is something I struggle with a lot of what's being fed into my mind. And so just want to take a couple of y'all's thoughts. Toby, I'll start with you, and if you want to throw anything out there from the sermon that stood out to you or something you've been thinking about, Roddy, we'll hit you next. Take 2 minutes and tell me what you think.
Yeah, I know. Noise is definitely something that we get used to, kind of subjected to unnecessarily sometimes, and definitely overwhelming most of the time. I thought the message was on point, hit home on a lot of things. I thought it was super fitting that Derek's piano layer got hung up and we had the pad going at the beginning of it where there was this ambient noise. If you watch the live stream, you'll probably pick it up, but I literally thought, until I put my hearing aids back on after playing, I was like, what is that? It's a heavenly noise being emitted from the pulpit, and ran up there and hit the pad button, and it created another pad, so that was not it. But that was hilarious that we started that message off with Racket. It was totally fitting.
But so the week before we did Freedom from Chaos, and that was a chaotic service.
Super.
Like, for sure. Like, it was like really chaotic.
Super.
And then this week it was Freedom from the Noise, and there was noise right off the bat.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Kind of going to make me gun shy as we approach,
Regret.
perception and regret and, some of these other messages. Like, I hope there's not.
Yeah. What about you, Rowdy?
Yeah, it was great. One of the main takeaways I got from it was when Justin was talking about the alone time, and when he compared it to like alone time with your kids. I think I've probably learned the most about each of my individual children when it's just been one-on-one. When I have 4 of them. Toby has 4, Josh has 3. I think when right, yeah. When we're around them all, and one of them's always yelling "Daddy" or "Mommy," there's a lot of noise, and you're so spread thin that you can't focus. But it's those truck rides or running to the store or going to baseball practice with just one of them, where you really learn the most, and that's because it's that alone time, but it's quiet alone time. I mean, I've also had alone time with with all of my kids where it's chaotic and noisy, and nothing gets accomplished. That relationship isn't going anywhere. But it's those quiet, still moments that I love love so much.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, there's constant noise. Everyone has noise in their life, and it's, you know, you start to, it's damaging, right? So take someone who's exposed to loud noises always, and they start having hearing loss to where they're just, to where they don't even know that it's noisy anymore. You know, and you just, that becomes your norm, and you know,
or like when there's a hum in the background, and it goes off, and you're like, I didn't even realize that was there.
Right.
I think I'm sorry to cut you off,
No,
but that
that's
just
great.
I thought, yeah, it is great, because I was asleep for that part of the sermon, I think. And, but I think that so many times we get so used to the noise that's going on that the enemy's feeding into our mind that we just kind of accept it as though like that's the normal thing. Like, you know, the words that the enemy's feeding you, like, dude, you're a terrible father, you're a terrible mother, you're like a terrible pastor. Like, you know, like those are the things that I don't hear in my head that I'm a terrible mother, but I hear that I'm a terrible father in my head. Like, I'll hear that, you know, you have these qualities about you that make you incompetent to be a pastor, and those things, man, they tear you down, and you kind of don't, you get to the point where you don't even realize that they're going on in the back of your mind. And so, I mean, if someone's constantly telling you that, hey man, you're a failure, you're a failure, you're a failure, but it's just, maybe I should say it softer, you're a failure, you're a failure. If that's telling you that all the time, then at some point that noise is going to be truth to you.
Right.
That's dangerous.
Yeah.
That's really dangerous. And another thing that you said that sparked my imagination, because you're just so great with your words, Rowdy, is there's noise even in silence. And that's the other noise. And I think this is the noise that we're looking for, is when it's in moments of silence when actually you hear the noise that you need to hear. Because if you won't stop for long enough to actually listen to focus in on what the Father has for you, all you're going to hear is the noise of the world, because it's always playing.
No, I think you hit on something. It's a conversation you and I have talked about throughout this last year. But if you ever notice, if you get out into the wilderness, you know, Justin hit on that. Jesus, you know, left into the wilderness. Man, out there, dude, it's stars. Birds chirping. You know, I spend a lot of time in the outdoors during hunting season, especially with the kids. That's a super awesome one-on-one time. Although there's no talking, because they'll be like, Dad. It's right there. Hey, we gotta eat, right? We're not just there to have one-on-one time. No, I'm just kidding. Anyways, all those things are mesmerizing. Like there's a way a sunset makes you feel that nothing else will make you feel that way. There's a way, you know, sky full of stars at night will make you feel that nothing else makes you feel that way. Watching the waves roll in over the lake or the ocean or whatever, just something that only he can do that we have zero impact on. That's when you know, and you start feeling that, wow, and I'm tiny, right? 2, you're huge. Okay, what do you have for me? You know, and you get away from all that stuff, especially if these things, man, make more noise than I care. You know, I'll give you a crazy example. We have a continuing glucose monitor for my daughter. One of my daughters has got type 1 diabetes, and so my wife's phone literally will ding when it's high blood sugar, signal loss, low blood sugar, which is like we need to address like immediately, all that stuff, and it'll go off all night long in some form or fashion as we balance and all that good stuff. And with that, you know, there's the Weather Channel says it's going to be sunny today, or it's going to rain this afternoon. There's messages that she's loving on people, or people are loving on her, whatever the case may be. Just normal communication through there. But man, it is so noisy, non-stop, that it is almost difficult. And what do you call it, withdrawals? Like if you take it away and like we live in another room, we get so used to what comes through this, and for so many times, during days in recruiting and sales and stuff like that, man, anytime that went off, man, that was a potential leader or customer. You better jump on it right that second, and so you keep it on you 24/7, and that noise begins to get louder, right, than the noise that should. That conversation with, hey, Dad, will you look at this? Yeah, just a second. Hey, Mom, will you come outside and swim with me? Just a second. And that's not the good noise. And you think about it this way: if our kids have a hard time that we can see, that make themselves very visible in our lives, if they have a hard time getting our attention because of the noise, man, how much harder for God that you can't see.
I definitely think you have to be like very intentional about your quiet, like intimate alone time. Like, I mean, I don't know if either of you have tried like any kind of like meditation or there's this one that I had found, and it was like this Christian based like guided meditation, and you're supposed to like have a word that almost like your mantra, and it's like just Holy Spirit or Jesus just over and over again, and it talks you through it. And it is, when I first tried it, it was ridiculous and just eye-opening to me at how hard it is
to be silent,
to just be still, be like in your mind, be still also, and like trying to really hone in on like intentional dedicated prayer, or whatever it is. And it's like 15 seconds will pass by and you're thinking about what you had for breakfast or whatever it may be, and it's like you intentionally, like, you have to point that out to yourself, like, okay, we're getting off track, come back.
Right.
And it's like in those moments, like whenever you like discipline yourself to actually practice that alone time, I think there would be absolutely great benefits to like realizing that we need that, because subconsciously we're always like squirrel, like ding, this, like you said, and it's great, this thing will stop the most intimate conversation you could have just by a ding, and all of a sudden this is the most important thing.
Rowdy, you have a tattoo on your forearm. I can't remember exactly what it says. What does it say?
Redeemer, I pray that if I should stray, you would break my legs to save my life.
I think that could be with the noise too.
Sure.
Like, if I can't hear you, do whatever it takes to make me hear you.
Yeah, and that's, I always joke about like, this tattoo has been one of the greatest things and worst things for me, because like, if your kid gets in trouble and is like, if you need to ground me for a year, go ahead. It's like, well, fine, you're grounded for a year. If that's what this is going to take, it's
whatever
like
it
to
takes,
break
man.
my legs to save my life. Like, I'm not saying you're giving God permission, but like, you put it out there, like you prayed that, you got it on your body. You better mean it.
Ink on your body, man.
Yeah, like you better mean this. And I think there definitely is that certain point of, I mean, just like talking to your kids, like, Eleanor, then you got to get loud, or put your hand on their shoulder, get their attention in some way,
softly and gently.
Yes.
No, I think it's funny, like when we think of like the context of our kids with all the others around, you almost have to guard that conversation against interruptions, to like let them know, like, for example, Hunter, my 5-year-old, would be telling me about like a cat pooped in the yard or something like that, but for some reason or other she values like that enough to tell me about it. Where Taylor or Jordan might be telling me about like school and academics and something super like significant, and I'm like, okay, hold on a second, I'm talking to her. Okay, go ahead. And you gotta, like, as a father, man, I think he does an awesome job too of providing those opportunities where he'll silence all those other things if you'll go ahead once it's done. Does that make sense at all? Justin did a great job on highlighting the fact that Jesus would do something profound, and And then he's like, cool. I gotta go see what my dad's got for me next.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We're going to feed 5,000. Okay, let's get out of here. All right, Father, what do you got? Okay, disciples. Those are great questions. Yes. I'll be back in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the struggles that probably is definitely in our church, but probably in the church, just in the kingdom as a whole, in Western culture at least, is going to be that we're really good at showing up and participating in worship and doing those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the thing that we struggle with the most by far is being able to actually hear from God and to put yourself in a position when, and here's the problem with that, is that whenever you're not putting yourself in a position to ask and allow for the Holy Spirit to feed into you and to lead you, you're the one leading yourself, right? So you're just hurting yourself, and at that point you're just part of a social club. Like if the Holy Spirit's not leading your life and you're not listening for the noise coming from the Spirit, man, all you're doing is you're coming to church, which is great, spending time with your friends and your brothers and sisters, and that's great, but you're not helping your friends and brothers and sisters any. If you're not being fed. I can't feed into you if I'm not listening to the Spirit. I can't feed into you if I'm not listening to the Spirit. Y'all can't feed into me. What are we doing at that point? God wants to speak to us, like He still does, man. What's the Robert Morse book? It's frequency, and the way that God speaks to us in different ways. And the more that you hear God speak, the more that you're going to be able to recognize that God's speaking. One of the biggest things that people will ask me is they'll say, "I can't hear. Like I never. You said you heard from God. I've never heard from God. How do you hear from God?" I don't know. I do. Because I pray. I spend time in His Word. That's one of the ways that He actually does bring noise to us, is through His Word. So let's hit on that for a little bit, because I think that that's probably going to help our worldwide viewers more than anything right now. Is hey man, how can you hear the right noise? How can you hear the noise that comes from our Father? So Toby, hit that first.
Man, I think that leads me to a situation that I had with a young soldier that I enlisted, and this young lady had never even been in a fight, like with one of her sisters, right? And one of the lessons that we were teaching was combatives, just basic entry level jiu-jitsu and all this other good stuff. And like I said, she hadn't done anything more than just slapped a sister over some, like, wearing a shirt or whatever. And as we're going through the steps or whatever, it came to it's time to execute, and we're going to start rolling, is what the term is, where basically friendly competing and all that. And I'm pretty like enthusiastic about that stuff. I get down on it. I love it. It gets me excited, and I love for nothing more to see somebody who's barely crawled in that environment to start running in it. And so she gets in this engagement, and it gets in a bad way, and is almost in what they call a rear naked choke, man. And it's a super dangerous position to be in. And she just looks at me, and there's all these soldiers yelling and hollering and hooting, and to include myself. But I'm like, look at me. Like, don't worry about nothing else. Look at me. And I walk her through what she needs to do, and she ends up turning around and ends up breaking the dude's 2 ribs, coming out to find out which way. I was so proud, and her dad, Trey, was so proud as well. But man, through all that noise, she could hear my voice. Because we had talked so many times. I'd walked her through so many times. It reminds me of, Jordan, back when she was playing basketball, these parents are hollering, and, if you've been to a basketball game, especially in, like, youth stuff, it's out of control noise. But she could hear my voice. She knew her father. And I think, man, going back to what you were talking about, if you don't know somebody's voice, it just sounds like everybody else's voice. You don't recognize it as the one I need to be listening to. So imagine showing up for, like, on a team, right? Showing up for practice, but I'm just showing up to hang out with my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to listen to what the coach is going to say.
Mm.
I mean, that could be for a variety of reasons. One, it may be challenging, you know, two, it may be pushing me out of my comfort zone. I don't know if I can do that, if I'm strong enough or fast enough or whatever the case may be. So many times in life, you know, you get that strange nudge.
Mm-hmm.
Hey man, go say you're sorry. Hey, go over there and buy that dude a hamburger.
Mm-hmm.
Invite that family over for dinner. Invite that family member to church. And we're like, what was that? Nah, I'm good. That's uncomfortable. I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
And so we tune it out.
Mm-hmm.
Much like a phone call that we get and you know that's going to be an awkward conversation. You just put it off.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, man. I think it's super critical to develop a prayer life, to stay in the Word. You know, when people are like, man, he's not talking to me. No, he's got a lot to say to you. In between that cover, there's a lot that he's got to say to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, if we don't read the manual, how are we going to complete the project? So.
Yeah. What about you, Ronnie?
To kind of piggyback some off of what Toby said, I mean, knowing, first to be able to hear the Father, like you have to know his voice, you know, and I'm sure we all have a version of like a noise or a word that you say specifically in like your kids, like no to look, you know, like, you know, there's a thing I do that it instantly, no matter what's going on, gets my kids' attention.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just psst, like, hey, you know, whether it's
That's the noise?
a whistle, that's the noise. Yeah.
Wow.
Psst,
I like that.
Yeah. But
It's a great noise.
like they know that noise. Like they know to look for like me or mom when they hear that because of like the familiarity.
Right.
Right. Like they know my voice.
Training.
You know, that training. And first to be able to actually hear, you know, the Lord, like you have to know his voice, and that only comes through like spending time and intentionally listening. Like you have to learn it, you know.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people look for that you know dream, you know, where that like big booming voice, and you know, unless you know what you're looking for, like it's very easy to, I think that's what he said.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially if you're distracted. You know, like you can tell somebody like, hey, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, or even someone asking you, hey, what do you know, Pastor Josh, what is your take on this? Bishop Norv, what is your take on this? And if I'm not intentionally listening to you, then I'm going to walk away from that conversation, go, I think I know what he was saying.
Yeah.
You know, so it's that, it has to be like that, very intentional, you know. And then like on the chaotic side of the noise, like when everything's going, you're going 100 miles an hour, you can't hear. And Toby, I imagine like you and Justin could speak volumes to in a truly hectic, noisy, crazy combat situation. Like you have to know what your you know, platoon leader's voice is, like, and you have to be able to like hone in on that, even amongst everything, and trust that he's doing the same and can relay that information back to you. And you know that it's the noise, the decisions, the chaos has all been filtered, and you're getting, you know, here's what's next. Here's the next plan.
You know, it's a lot of that is in the planning stage. You know, 5 paragraphs of an op order or whatever, and that's the developing an operation, any operation, any scenario that you may encounter. Here's what's going to happen, and here's how it's going to happen. Who's going to do what, and one of them is command and signal, and that's where you decide those frequencies. Hey, check it out. If we need air support, we're going to hop over to freak whatever. You know, platoon net, just us, is this. You know, and you decide ahead of time before the chaos endures who's going to do what and who you're going to talk to and all that stuff. And I think you know, if we go ahead and this is just through fervent prayer life and all that stuff, you develop a good freak that you and God can hop on and get it done, man. The only way to communicate without stepping on each other on that is just you and him be on that net.
Right.
And I think that's what Jesus did a super good job of is, hey man, there's too many of y'all. Y'all got too many questions, or hey, cool, you're welcome. I know y'all got plenty of bread left. I need to go over here for a while. Because there's big stuff coming up, and when I encounter this, I need to know what the plan was. That way I can be sure of myself and sure of what he wants me to do before I continue anymore. And I think that's what, you know, this is not a knock on anybody or anything like that, but Josh and I were talking, maybe it's just me, but recently a conversation come up of, you know, God, show me if I'm supposed to do option A, or show me if I'm supposed to do option B, you know, or even C in some scenarios and all of that. Man, God never gave me an option. It's like, hey, go and do this. Now go and do this. Or stop doing that. You know, and I feel like those options come from too many people on your freak. Your own flesh or sin nature or desires, the enemy, which sounds a lot like us sometimes, and sometimes sounds like him. And then of course, the Lord's not going to get interrupted, man. Cool. If you want to listen to all that chatter, you know where to find me. When you're ready to get away from that noise, you know where I'll be. And it is there every night, every day, every morning.
Yeah, I think that's good. Right back to what you're saying, like, God doesn't give you options. Like, he doesn't say, if you want to forgive this person, then you can go forgive them. If not, here's what I need you to do. No, it's like, you need to go forgive that person. And, like, that's going to be the noise that you're hearing in your head. And until you actually do that, it's going to be chaos in your mind. Like, you're not going to be free until you do what God's calling for you to do. And a lot of people who are waiting on a word, like from the Lord, God's not going to give them another word when they already have a word. Like, why would he give you another step when you haven't done the steps that he's already actually given you?
Just told you.
Yeah.
Like,
hey man, I told you to do this. Do it.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to start speaking to you again. Like, it's parents do this all the time. I'm not going to tell you again. Like, why, if God's the good father, like, why would he be any different? He's like, this is what's best for you. Now go and do it. But and I think Justin, you're out of the camera, but I think your message was really valuable to us, and it's valuable to our church. And I think that if we can apply those things that you were talking about, and the lies that the enemy feeds us, and then the patterns that Jesus used, there's freedom in that, no doubt. And so we'll close with that. I just want to encourage our church to just know that there is freedom. Freedom is found in Jesus Christ. But the enemy, we have an enemy, very real, Satan, and he wants nothing more than to keep you into bondage. Galatians 5:1 says, Christ has set you free, now make sure you stay free. So I think it's easy for us to gain freedom and then start listening to that noise again. And so my request, my hope for us as a church is that you'll set some time aside, listen to the noise that you need to listen to, and then filter out all the rest of the junk. And man, I feel like there's freedom after that, no doubt. So we're going to call that a wrap. We'll see you guys next week. We'll be doing freedom from perception. And so that's been a hard one for me as I'm preparing this week to preach that one. And then the week after that, it's going to be freedom from regret. And so I'm making Toby preach that one because I don't want to feel bad about myself when I'm preparing a whole week to preach that message. So y'all be praying for Toby on that as well. Rowdy, I'm proud of you. You didn't talk about Jonah or Daniel one time. I didn't think that was going to happen. So, man, cool. All right, well, we'll see you guys next week. Freedom from perception. All right.